The dark road ahead. I was looking for a car to buy for my son's 18th birthday, scouring all the usual websites, cars, Com, eBay Motors, and the like. As expected, everything was overpriced. Craigslist was the only place where I could find something more reasonable. About a week into my search, I came across an Euro 3 Toyota Camry. It had only 67,000 miles, no accidents, no damage, and was in good condition, all for $3,500. It seemed like a steal for such a reliable car with low mileage. The seller lived about 10 miles away, so I gave him a call to arrange a time to check it out. The man, Bob, sounded perfectly normal over the phone and assured me there were no issues with the car. I brought $3,500 in cash, even though I planned to try and negotiate the price down a little. Arrived about 12 minutes early and drove up a dirt road to his property. It was a small house with a decent-sized yard, mostly because it was a bit far from the nearest neighbors. The garage was open, but I didn't see the car. Just a lot of car parts scattered around. The only vehicle on the property was an old pickup truck. I walked up to the front door, checked the house numbers to make sure I had the right address. There was no doorbell, so I knocked. I knocked for about 5 minutes before deciding to call Bob. To my surprise, I could hear his phone ringing from inside the house. I was confused. If he was home, why wasn't he answering the door? I decided to take a look through one of the windows. The inside was dark, but I could make out an old-fashioned dining room set. And then, across from that, I saw a figure standing at the back door, staring outside. I knocked on the window, but he didn't move. There was no fence or gate to the backyard, so I walked around the house to the back. As I approached the back door, I realized with a shock that the figure wasn't a person at all. It was a taxidermied human. I ran back to my car, my heart hammering in my chest. I glanced up before driving away and froze. The blinds to the window I had peeked into were now shut, but I could see two of the blinds slightly open. Someone was watching me. I didn't waste another second. I slammed the car into gear, tires spinning as I sped away from that house. I never looked back, but my mind couldn't shake the image of that lifeless, fake human standing still in the darkness. Hallucination. When I was a kid, I was often left alone with my single mom. She'd always come check on me every night when she got up to use the bathroom. One night, I woke up thinking I heard something in my closet. When I looked up, my mom was standing at the foot of my bed, giving me a playful wave and telling me to go back to sleep. She then walked over to my closet, opened the door just a crack, and stood there with her head poking through, her eye peeking at me. Naturally, I was spooked, but I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, while eating cereal, I asked my mom why she had been hiding in my closet the night before. She stopped dead in her tracks, looking puzzled and concerned. She told me she hadn't even been in my room that night. At first, she thought maybe someone had broken into the house, but soon she realized it must have been some kind of hallucination or dream. Since then, I've only had 2 other hallucinations, but nothing as vivid or creepy as that: the storm and the stalker. In 2009, I spent a weekend at my uncle's ranch while my parents renovated our new house. On the second night, a massive storm hit, thunder and lightning crashing nearly every second. I was enjoying the storm from my bed when I started hearing strange metallic thuds outside. I tried to ignore it, but after the third thud, I got up and went to the window. The rain made it hard to see anything, but lightning lit up the yard long enough for me to spot a figure crouched near the basement door, bashing at the lock. I quickly closed the window, locked it, and pretended to sleep. After a few more lightning strikes without the thud, I thought maybe I was overreacting. But then, I turned to look at the window and saw a figure standing there, staring directly at me. I screamed and ran to my uncle's room. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside, but he didn't find anyone. The next morning, we found that the basement door lock had been nearly broken open. My uncle was proud of me for noticing it, and I turned to look at the window and saw a figure standing there, staring directly at me. I screamed and ran to my uncle's room. He grabbed his rifle and ran outside, but he didn't find anyone. The next morning, we found that the basement door lock had been nearly broken open. My uncle was proud of me for noticing it, and I was just glad I wasn't home alone when it happened. The theater of horrors. I know it might sound strange, but I enjoy going to the movies by myself. My schedule's all over the place, and sometimes I'll go on a quiet night when no one else is around. One Wednesday night in 2017, I went to see a low-key movie at a nearly empty theater. About 20 minutes in, I noticed someone a few rows away, but they weren't sitting normally. They were just peering over the back of the seat, looking in a direction that wasn't the screen. When the scene changed and the theater got brighter, I saw that the person was staring directly at me. Their face was pale and lifeless, and their hair was messy. I didn't want to make a scene, so I stayed in my seat. But soon enough, the person ducked behind the seat and disappeared from view. I couldn't focus on the movie after that. A while later, their head popped up again, much closer this time, just a few rows away. Their face looked even more lifeless, their eyes wide open and unblinking. I jumped up, terrified, and bolted for the exit. As I passed the row, I looked down and froze. There was a man lying on the floor, holding a severed head perched on a stick. I didn't stick around to find out if it was real. I ran out of the theater, drove home, and did some research. I found the picture of a missing teenager named Donald Watkins, and the head I saw could have matched his. I called the theater the next day and suggested they check their cameras, but I never heard back. Marv's watchful eyes. A while ago, I lived with my good friend Ben in a house on a quiet street in Northville, Michigan, near Detroit. The house wasn't the nicest, but it was cheap, and we both needed a place. Across the street from us was an abandoned house, overgrown with weeds and graffiti on the windows. Our neighbors on one side seemed sketchy, and the older guy on the other side, Marv, was friendly but weird. One evening, while sitting outside, I noticed a face in the upstairs window of the abandoned house, staring at us. Ben didn't see it at first, but I was sure I wasn't imagining it. The next day, we went over to Marv's house to tell him, but he wouldn't answer the door, even though we could see him inside watching TV. That night, we decided to break into the abandoned house and see what was going on. The house was old and dusty, but surprisingly untouched inside, with no signs of vandalism. We were exploring when we suddenly heard heavy footsteps from above us. We bolted out of there, ran back to our house, and saw Marv standing by his window, staring at us. We left the next day and never looked back. The party in the woods. For my son's 12th birthday, my wife and I threw a party in our backyard. We live in rural New Jersey, so our property backs up to the woods. As the night went on and the mosquitoes came out, I went to grab the tiki torches from the shed at the far end of the yard. While I was in the shed, I heard footsteps in the woods, but it was too dark to see anything. After setting up the torches, the kids, including my son, went off to play hide-and-seek in the woods. Everything was fine for a while, but then I heard something rustling in the trees. Something was moving in the dark, and it was getting closer. Suddenly, a loud scream echoed through the woods. I rushed out, heart pounding, to see my son and his friends standing by the tree line, eyes wide with terror. They whispered about someone lurking in the woods, something that wasn't supposed to be there. But when I searched, there was nothing. Nothing except the trees and the unsettling feeling that we weren't alone. These tales all reflect the horrifying, chilling moments that linger in our minds long after the events have passed. The things we can't explain. The things that hide just out of sight. Always watching.